Hello and welcome to Greiner Bio-One Talks. My name is Ana Maria Šimundić and I'm the Global Director of the Department for Medical and Clinical Affairs at Greiner Bio-One. Today we have a very special guest here, Dr. Jaime Noguez, who is the Associate Professor of Pathology at Case Western Reserve University and a section head of clinical chemistry, toxicology, and diagnostic immunology at University Hospital Cleveland Medical Center. Welcome, Dr. Noguez.
Thank you.
Dr. Noguez is not only a scientist, but also a parent. And as a parent, she's also a very passionate advocate for inspiring young girls, especially minorities, to pursue STEM careers, striving to be a role model for balancing leadership in science with a fulfilling personal role. So, Dr. Noguez, tell us a little bit about your role. What made you become a clinical chemist? And what are your day-to-day responsibilities as a clinical chemist?
All right. Well, as a clinical chemist, I serve as the interface between the clinicians on the floor and the lab. And I've loved being able to use my passion for science to help patients and to show others that there are plenty of well-trained, passionate people that work behind the scenes in the laboratory that participate in healthcare and in the care of patients. So I think that's where my passion comes from, using my love of science to continue to help patients. Day to day, I ensure that everything is running smoothly in the lab in terms of workflows and providing the highest level of patient safety, the highest quality of patient care that we can, making sure that we're meeting all regulatory requirements. Mm-hmm. That's at a high level what I do.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So today we are here to talk about digital solutions in Preanalytics. So tell me, where do you see the need for digital solutions? In what areas of preanalytical phase?
So I think that by embracing digital tools, we'll be able to reduce a lot of the manual errors that we're seeing. And by providing more of these tools, I think we'd be able to do things like enhance traceability of specimens, perhaps even improve specimen integrity by having some type of real-time tracking from the time that the specimen is drawn to when it reaches the laboratory. I think digitizing more could help us also with error detection. Right now, errors are created, but they're very hard for us to track, to catch them. So by digitizing more, we'd be able to potentially reduce the number of patient misidentifications, mislabeling of tubes, or even maybe real time in the moment capture when someone's drawing the wrong tube for the patient. So there's a number of different ways that I think it could help. Additionally, I think if we can continue to digitize more of our checklists and protocols, we may be able to help standardize the specimen collection process, which is still quite variable. Even if you have great procedures, great training, I think things kind of wane over time. And so
a lot of room. So what do you think, let's imagine a lab, your lab, in 10 years, and giving all this technical innovations and digital innovations. What will your lab look like in 10 years from now? Let's try to imagine that.
10 years from now, I feel that most of the process will be digitized, right? So all the manual parts will have fallen by the wayside. And I think it's going to allow us to do a better job at error detection. I think that we'll be able to then take advantage of AI, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, to do AI-driven process improvements. So we'll be able to take the human element out of things. We'll be able to amass larger amounts of data. We'll be able to manage things in real time rather than reactively, which a lot of labs tend to do. We do our best to be proactive, to put the appropriate procedures in place and the training in place, but without capturing the information, the data to know where our problems are, it makes it very hard to be proactive. And so I think going digital is the way to go, and I see in the next 5 to 10 years, that's where we'll be.
Exciting. So let's talk about patient identification and sample identification, time of collection. What are the regulatory requirements and what digital solutions are there to meet those requirements and what is missing?
So in the U.S., we have CLIA regulations and CAP, and they have established quality standards for lab testing to really ensure the accuracy and reliability of results. And so at a very high level, they require us to, one, make sure that we are collecting the specimen from the appropriate patient, to ensure that there are two identifiers on the container, which could be either their name, date of birth, or a medical record, some type of unique identification. And then if they have higher level testing done, like samples that'll be going to the blood bank, then we have to make sure that we have the date, the time, and even the initials or signature of the phlebotomist who drew the blood. And so it's very hard on a day-to-day, even though these seem like fairly simple things to do, to ensure that they happen consistently. And I know I can speak from personal experience in our lab, implementing positive patient identification has helped tremendously with reducing error rates of patient misidentification. Huge. And I think that there's a lot of potential for continuing to embrace technology in terms of like pre-barcoded tubes, or some other type of AI-driven labeling, to help us detect these errors in real time. So there's a lot of potential.
What
there.
about time of blood sampling? How is this at the moment done? How is time of blood collection recorded in your hospital?
Recorded. So we have recently moved to a new hospital information system as well as lab information system. And so this is captured at the time that they're drawing the blood. So we have the order put in, we know what time the clinical teams put the order in, and the computer system captures the time that it's collected with the initials of the person who's collecting it.
That is great.
And so it's different. There are some digital solutions, and then there's some where it's still manually done depending on the offices. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about sample transport.
Yes.
What are the requirements for samples when samples are transported from the site of collection to the lab? And again, how does your lab meet those requirements? What are the challenges there?
So aside from the Department of Transportation regulations, which really cover appropriate packaging, labeling, and documentation of any biological hazard, right? CLIA and CAP, they require labs to ensure the quality of the specimen from the time that it's collected all the way until the testing is performed. And labs can do that by using appropriate containers that would kind of help track the temperature of the specimens and the humidity and just make sure that they're being transported in the appropriate conditions to maintain integrity. Some of the challenges that we face, though, is that, couriers will sometimes miss a pickup. We have very good routes in place, excellent procedures, but there's always that human element. So when a sample gets missed or a pickup happens, but then specimens end up sitting someplace for an extended period of time, labs are also charged with being able to detect delays in transport and any deviations from the protocols that may impact or the accuracy of the patient results. So in our hospital system, we've tried very hard to introduce more checkpoints, right? So more barcodes being read along the way to offer traceability from when the sample was collected to when it reaches the lab. We can certainly have more checkpoints in there because things do get kind of shifted all around the system and end up places sometimes that you don't expect. I think the other thing that we've tried to do is implement these reports that we write up very quickly so that we can understand the sources of the errors and then try to address them early.
How is temperature monitored?
This is a
what are
hard
the
one.
requirements and how do you do it in your lab?
So this is a hard one. So we transport them. We also create packing lists, right? So we have certain samples that need to be shipped frozen, and so they are on a separate packing list, and those that can be transported refrigerated or at room temperature. So the temperature is tracked in the site that they're collected to maintain temperature until they're picked up. We transport them in the appropriate containers. So if they're in dry ice for frozen samples or with ice packs for refrigerated, and then they're checked again when they get to the appropriate site. So
what is missing then to do
what
it
is missing?
better?
So you've kind of heard me allude to this. If there was some way to have real-time tracking of specimen integrity, so something that can tell you all along the way what temperature that sample's been exposed to, and so we can more easily detect deviations. Right now, we have fewer checkpoints, which it works okay. But if we could have complete traceability from the time of collection till it reaches the lab with sensors, that would be amazing.
Okay. Let's move on to artificial intelligence. You did mention that already. Do you use it in your personal life, maybe, or professional life?
Oh, absolutely. I am a huge proponent of AI. So at home, I use Amazon Alexa all the time as my digital assistant. I also am a big fan of the product recommendations, the personalized product recommendations from like Netflix or Amazon. I find them to be incredibly helpful. And even just getting driving directions to kind of optimize my route with like Google Maps or Waze or things like that. I feel like it's been a bit harder to adopt or slower to adopt, I think, in my professional life, but I've just, started to embrace it in terms of like talk to text, to dictate things, and ChatGPT has been kind of a game changer. But for me, it's important to figure out how to use it to enhance my life, not to replace any skill set that I have. And so I think that's the big thing, is figuring out how to appropriately use it as a tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you see its application in healthcare and in particular in pre-analytics?
Preanalytics. Ooh, this is a fun question to think about. I think that I would love to see some more AI-driven patient communications, like sending information to patients as a reminder, hey, you have an appointment coming up and you need to fast, or even helping patients and clinicians walk them through a specimen collection with either a video or helping them so that we can improve the specimen collection process, standardize that. I also think that there's the possibility to use it for chatbots. A lot of times people have questions that can commonly be answered in the laboratory, and you just have to wait on the phone for someone to be able to find that, half the time really we're short-staffed. And so I think that that would make things a lot easier for physicians or clinicians and patients, right, to be able to have more real-time access to the lab with commonly answered questions kind of being handled by computerized tools.
You mentioned that you use in your private life, that you use AI to, for example, help you optimize your way to work.
Yes.
Do you see some maybe a role for AI in optimizing some of the processes, pre-analytical processes?
Absolutely.
Would that be something, in 10 years from now?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it goes hand in hand with what we talked about earlier. I think first thing is we have to digitize things, right? We have to digitalize more so that we get rid of the human and the manual parts. And then the more that we have available for AI to help us with, right? Like the more of a benefit that we'll see. And so I can definitely see specimen prioritization, workflow optimization, just like when you have Google Maps or Waze, and it helps to optimize the fastest route to get someplace. You could also see that with couriers even, or even in the moment, switching how your automation works in the lab for optimal performance at that time of day. Definitely. And I very much look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so we talked about digital solutions, but one thing that is also something that will come in the future more and more is automation in pre-analytics. Pre-analytics is still highly manual, right? And many of the pre-analytical processes are still done manually. So how do you see the future there? What areas will be most likely automated, and what will be the benefits then?
So I think that automating sample collection would be a great way to go. I think that we have a staffing shortage now, and so finding a way to somehow automate the sample collection would be excellent. But I also think the processing steps are where we could really use a lot of help. There are a lot of tools out there that are available, but typically it's larger labs that use them. I would love to see those become more affordable and integrated into even like smaller community hospital labs and not just the larger reference labs or academic medical centers. Standardizing, aliquoting, spinning down of samples, and detecting when something is in the wrong tube, right, before you even put it on a line to perform the testing. So I think that there's a lot of effort that could be focused on specimen processing.
So we talked about digital solutions, we talked about AI, we talked about automation and pre-analytics. Let's think about the future. What do you think is going to be the major disruptive technology in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, this is probably one of my favorite things to think about, actually, but the use of drones as couriers of specimens. I think that would help us to get specimens from one location to another faster. It removes the human element, which could potentially, cause some errors. But I also think that it helps us meet a lot of our regulatory requirements. I mean, surely there's a lot of things that would have to come to pass before that could happen. But I would say use of drones. I think potentially blood collection robots, I think. I mean, I think that it would take some time for them to be adopted, but I think that they would soon become commonplace. And then I also think tubes that have sensors in them. So like from the time they're collected to the time they reach the lab, it's full traceability.
Tube. Like smart tube.
Yes, smart tubes, yes. And then I think the other thing is we spend a lot of time like reading one tube at a time. Like that is the limitation of current automation. If we had RFID tags where we could just read everything that is in the area, essentially, I think that would help with workflows. So that's definitely coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me ask you just one question for the end of this podcast. What would be your most memorable pre-analytics moment from a patient perspective?
See, so I have so many of these on a day-to-day basis, it's hard to just pick one, but I will pick a personal one. So I remember when my first child was born, we were still in the hospital, and he needed to have his newborn labs drawn. And I remember seeing the phlebotomist walk into the room, and I remember just having this sigh of relief because I knew who she was. We had worked in the same hospital, and so in fact, when we go through our quality meetings, I would see that she had the best stats. She had the best collection rates, the lowest rejection rates, and she'd been working for maybe 20, 30 years in the hospital. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I wish we can get all new phlebotomists up to her speed, like as quickly as possible. She would draw the smallest babies, the hardest sticks, she would do it with ease. And so for me, it was in that moment, like being really nervous about having this being that I just created being poked at, but like knowing that he was in the best hands possible. And I think that's what drives me to continue to advocate that new phlebotomists get the training and whatever they need to get them up to kind of her level as fast as possible.
What do you think makes a great phlebotomist? What does it take to become one?
Ooh, there's a lot that goes into that. But I think the first thing was being able to put people at ease, right? Because for a lot of people, getting their blood drawn is kind of a scary, a fearful process. And so I think first thing is being able to put people at ease, but also being good at what you do, right? And so I can tell the difference between someone who's very skilled and you can barely feel the pinch versus it being a traumatic process moving forward. So also being very skilled at what you do. And I think also being able to follow procedures and SOPs, even under times of stress with difficult sticks and things like that. So, I mean, clearly there's probably a lot more that goes into that, but those are the things that stick out to me as what makes people very successful in our institution.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Noguez, for this amazing interview. We learned a lot about digital solutions and automation and AI in Preanalytics. I hope that you have enjoyed this podcast as much as I have. Thank you.
Thank you.